It's fantastic that we are presenting the results of the international GALLIUM study as a plenary session here at ASH 2016. This is a large randomized study in patients with follicular lymphoma, asking the question whether the third generation anti-CD20 antibody Obinutuzumab, which has some potential advantages over rituximab in terms of mechanism of action, and the data is a large randomized phase 3 study with progression-free survival as the primary endpoint. And so very simple study design. Previously untreated patients with follicular lymphoma were treated with a chemotherapy backbone of bendamustine, CHOP or CVP, which was at the investigator discretion, and they were randomized to receive conventional IV rituximab or obinutuzumab with their chemotherapy. Those patients that responded continued with maintenance therapy according to whichever arm they were on. So they had rituximab or obinutuzumab maintenance. And the primary endpoint of the study was progression-free survival as assessed by the investigator. Now, this was the largest study, 1,200 patients ever undertaken in follicular lymphoma, a huge international collaboration, a huge international effort, which has been led by the UK NCRI lymphoma group and the German low-grade lymphoma study group. So in terms of the primary endpoint, there was a progression-free survival advantage for obinutuzumab in favor of rituximab. And the hazard ratio on that curve is 0.66, so highly significant. And really what that equates to is a 34% reduction in the risk of progression, relapse, death in those patients treated with obinutuzumab over those patients treated with rituximab. So a highly significant result. And that was confirmed by an independent endpoint review committee. And also there was a very similar hazard ratio for the perhaps more clinically meaningful endpoint of time to next treatment. Not unsurprisingly, there's no difference at this time point in overall survival, because remember, with follicular lymphoma, it takes a long time to see differences in overall survival. So a clearly very positive study in favor of obinutuzumab over rituximab. Now, we need to think about the adverse events, however, and I think that's very important to consider. Key was that it was very clear that patients receiving bendamustine, whether with G or with rituximab, had many more adverse events than those patients receiving CHOP or CVP chemotherapy. In those patients receiving obinutuzumab, there were more adverse events that we have recognized to be associated with the safety of obinutuzumab than in rituximab, although the number of adverse events was the same. And those adverse events were infusion-related reactions, probably a bit more in the way of infections, and there was a small increase in the number of patients with second malignancies in the obinutuzumab treated patients, but the numbers are very, very small, and that really needs some dissecting out. But the safety profile of obinutuzumab was exactly as one would have expected from the previous data that we've seen. So overall, this is a highly significant study with a clear benefit in terms of PFS for those patients treated with obinutuzumab over those treated with rituximab.
Are there any plans for any subgroup analysis or sequencing?
So there is subgroup analysis. There's no particular subgroup that was seen to benefit from antibody, one particular antibody over another. There is a huge translational package going on associated with this, and we're doing lots of workup in terms of biological correlates to really try and have a deep dive into the results from this study.